People didn't just notice Dakota Johnson's transformation, they questioned whether they had ever really seen her clearly before. Because what she revealed recently wasn't just a new look, it was a version of herself that felt almost completely redefined. And the most unsettling part? It didn't feel sudden, it felt like something that had been building quietly for years, only now becoming impossible to ignore. It all began with a moment that seemed ordinary on the surface. Dakota stepped into a public appearance, cameras flashing as always, but this time the reaction was different. Within seconds, people weren't just watching, they were staring, trying to understand what exactly had changed. At first, it looked like a transformation in style. Her fashion choices were sharper, more deliberate, carrying a confidence that didn't rely on trends but seemed to set them. The way she moved, the way she held herself, it all felt more controlled, more intentional, as if every detail had been carefully aligned with a new sense of identity. But the real shift wasn't in what she wore, it was in how she existed in that space. Dakota had always been known for her reserved, almost distant presence, someone who kept a layer between herself and the public. Now, that layer felt different. Not gone, but transformed into something stronger, something that didn't create distance but instead commanded attention. Fans immediately picked up on it. Comments flooded in describing her as unrecognizable, not because her features had changed, but because her energy had. There was a calm confidence in the way she responded to questions, a clarity in her tone that hadn't always been there before. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it was quiet, steady, and somehow more powerful because of it. As more footage surfaced, the details became harder to ignore. The way she maintained eye contact just a second longer than expected, the way she paused before answering as if choosing exactly how she wanted to be understood. These weren't random changes, they felt intentional, as if she had become fully aware of how she was being seen and decided to reshape that perception on her own terms. What made the transformation even more striking was the contrast with her past. For years, Dakota existed in a space where she was often misunderstood, especially after 50 Shades of Grey. She was seen through a narrow lens, defined by a role that didn't fully represent who she was. That kind of perception can quietly shape how someone presents themselves, even when they don't intend it. Now, it feels like she has stepped out of that frame entirely. Not by rejecting it, but by expanding beyond it. The version of Dakota people are seeing now isn't disconnected from her past, it's built on it, refined by it, and no longer limited by it. There was one moment in particular that seemed to capture this shift perfectly. During a brief pause in an interview, Dakota smiled, not in the usual polite, controlled way, but with a sense of ease that felt completely natural. It was subtle, almost easy to miss, but it carried a confidence that didn't need explanation. That moment became a focal point for many viewers. Not because it was dramatic, but because it felt real. It wasn't performance, it wasn't calculated for effect, it was simply her, fully present in a way that hadn't always been visible before. Naturally, speculation followed. What caused this change? Was it personal growth, a shift in her career, or something more private that she had chosen not to share? The lack of a clear answer only made the transformation more intriguing, because it suggested that whatever had changed wasn't something she felt the need to explain. And that's what makes it so compelling. This isn't a transformation that relies on announcement or validation, it exists on its own, visible without needing to be defined. It's the kind of shift that doesn't ask for attention, but inevitably draws it anyway. By the time the conversation around her transformation reached its peak, one thing had become clear. This wasn't temporary, and it wasn't superficial. It felt like a turning point, a moment where Dakota Johnson wasn't just being seen differently, she was choosing to be seen differently. And that leaves one question that continues to linger. Not just what changed, but whether this is the first time the world is finally seeing who she has always been beneath everything else. As the initial fascination with Dakota Johnson's transformation began to settle, a deeper realization started to emerge. This wasn't just about appearance or style, it was about control. Because when someone shifts this noticeably without explanation, it usually means something internal has changed first, long before the world is able to see it. For years, Dakota existed in a space where much of her public image was shaped by external perception. After 50 Shades, she became associated with a specific identity, one that followed her into interviews, roles, and even the way audiences interpreted her personality. That kind of association doesn't just fade on its own, it lingers, subtly influencing how someone presents themselves. What we're seeing now feels like a break from that influence. Not in a rebellious or dramatic way, but in a controlled, deliberate shift that suggests she has redefined how she wants to be perceived. Instead of reacting to expectations, she appears to be setting them. This is where the idea of transformation becomes more complex. It's not just about becoming someone new, it's about removing the layers that were never entirely accurate to begin with. And when that happens, the result can feel almost shocking, not because the person has changed completely, but because the version we knew was never the full picture. There's also the element of timing. Transformations like this rarely happen randomly, they tend to follow periods of reflection, growth, or even pressure. Dakota has spent years navigating an industry that constantly tries to define and categorize its actors. Reaching a point where she no longer needs to fit into those categories could explain why this shift feels so complete. Another important factor is how this change is being communicated. Dakota hasn't announced a reinvention, hasn't explained what's different, and hasn't tried to control the narrative directly. Instead, she's allowing her presence to speak for itself. That kind of quiet confidence often has a stronger impact than any statement could. It also changes how people respond to her. The attention she's receiving now isn't just curiosity, it's recognition. People are noticing something that feels more aligned, more intentional, and more authentic. Even those who can't fully explain it can sense that the change is real. Interestingly, this kind of transformation often reflects a shift in priorities. When someone becomes more grounded in who they are, they stop performing for approval and start acting from clarity. That doesn't mean they withdraw, it means they engage on their own terms. And that's exactly what Dakota's current presence suggests. At the same time, it's important to recognize that this doesn't erase her past, it reframes it. The roles, the public perception, the expectations, all of those experiences become part of the foundation that led to this moment. Without them, the transformation wouldn't carry the same weight. What makes this story so compelling is that it doesn't have a clear explanation. There's no single event, no specific turning point that can fully account for what people are seeing. Instead, it feels like the result of something gradual, something that built over time until it reached a point where it could no longer stay hidden. And that's what gives it a sense of authenticity. This isn't a sudden reinvention designed for attention, it's a natural progression that finally became visible. The kind of change that doesn't need to be announced because it's already understood the moment you see it. By the end of it all, the question isn't really about what caused Dakota Johnson's transformation. It's about what it represents. A shift from being defined by others to defining yourself. A movement from expectation to intention. And maybe that's why it resonates so strongly. Because it's not just about Dakota, it's about the moment when someone stops adjusting to the world around them, and starts shaping how that world sees them instead. And maybe that's why it resonates so strongly. Because it's not just about Dakota, it's about the moment when someone stops adjusting to the world around them, and starts shaping how that world sees them instead. And maybe that's why it resonates so strongly. Because it's not just about Dakota, it's about the moment when someone stops adjusting to the world around them, and starts shaping how that world sees them instead. And maybe that's why it resonates so strongly. Because it's not just about Dakota, it's about the moment when someone stops adjusting to the world around them,